Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman, here, as always, with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
Tony, for the, fourth time in a week or week and a half, something like that, we are doing a commitment podcast. Remember when June was the off season? Do you remember that? When that was not like the height of college football season? That was weird. Glad we're living in the present where we constantly have stuff to talk about and constantly have new commitments to do emergency podcasts about.
Yeah, there's no off season. That's one of the great things about college football, and it's also, Tom, the absolute worst thing about college football. No. It's always exciting. Recruiting is a season unto itself, and sometimes it can bridge the gap, but also sometimes it spans. It really never stops. It just encircles the college football globe, and it goes on and on. And you mentioned a commitment, so let's get to it. Georgia, four-star Georgia cornerback Kayin Lee has committed to Ohio State, 5'11", 185 pounds, number 18 corner in the class, number 145 overall, out of Cedar Grove High School, Tom, which also produced, I believe, Ohio State former defensive tackle Antoine Jackson, who took a tour to Auburn and in the junior college ranks before playing at Ohio State for 4 years, which is the longest a junior college transfer has ever played at Ohio State, I'm guessing. Anyway, Tom, Canley cornerback commitment gives Ohio State now 2 corners committed in the class. A lot to like about him. We just actually, sat here watched them together, essentially.
Yeah, we went through his sophomore and junior season highlight reels. And, there's always a danger to trying to scout someone through highlight reels because here's how a highlight reel works. It's only the good plays. So you never, that is how highlights work. So you're not getting the full picture you get from watching an actual game film or a whole series of games on film. But it was interesting to me because this was not just your typical, hey, outside corner prospect kind of film where it's like half of the film is him also playing running back or him also playing wide receiver. This was pretty much, there might have been a couple offense or special teams plays on there, but it was pretty much all defense. And it was a whole bunch of different defense because his role on the team, I think, had changed a little bit from his sophomore to his junior year, where you saw him, most of his sophomore season was him in run support. And so he can get off blocks, he can tackle guys in space. And then his junior season film was, I think he had 7 interceptions and a couple pass breakups. And then you get to the big hit portion of the highlight reel. It's like, okay, so this is a pretty well-rounded player who you've seen him in run support. You've seen him, track balls. You've seen him come off of one receiver to jump a route off of it. You come off the outside receiver and jump a route off of the slot receiver and run it back for a touchdown. You've seen him deliver some big hits. You've seen him stick and wrap in space. You've kind of seen a little bit of everything, and it's like, all right, so that looks like a pretty complete player to me.
Yeah, it was interesting. He played a lot of off man from his senior or his junior film, and it does a lot of watching the quarterback and watching the quarterback's eyes, which allows him to move to other receivers. And he triggers very, very quickly, has some good catch-up speed, can get downhill quickly, also has good makeup speed going the other way. I thought it's certainly an interesting prospect. And then you mentioned the big hit portion. He's not the biggest guy. As I said, 5'11", 185, but he is physical in help, like in run support and coming off of his receiver. Like he's not this corner who's going to manhandle the guy he's going against a lot of times because he's playing off coverage. So there is no there's not a lot of press that we got to see. So don't know how physical he is there yet, but he's certainly a willing tackler. And a lot of these that we're watching, you see him, he just throws a shoulder, which won't necessarily work in college football, but you see the physical aspect of him and the willingness. And as I'm watching this, I'm thinking, I wonder if this would be a viable option at the nickel spot, which we know has to be, you have to be able to defend the pass, but you also have to be able to help in run support. And when I'm watching this, I see a very willing tackler who isn't just some outside corner. I think I wouldn't be shocked if he ends up being that nickel, because that's generally, it has to be a former corner that handles that spot. And I think maybe it's this guy.
That was the same thought I had, and he sort of fits that inside the slot, slot corner, nickel, whatever. I mean, whatever. We've used 7 different terms for it over the last few years because Ohio State has used about 7 different terms for it over the last few years. Cover safety, nickel. I mean, it's that guy. This year it's the Tanner McAllister and Cameron Martinez kind of role, but a couple of years ago that was where Sean Wade was in 2019. That role, now you know what we're talking about. He's someone who he's not quite as big as some of the other guys that they're looking at corner. The other guy that they have in corner in this class is Dijon Johnson, who's listed a couple inches taller. So that generally you're going to put your taller guys on the outside because generally that's where the taller receivers are. So yeah, he does seem like he's kind of got all the skill sets that they're looking for there, because that is a position that's involved a little more in run support than the outside corner spots are. So that's an interesting thought that could be where he where he ends up, because I had the thought just based on height that could very well be where he fits, but just in terms of skill set, that might be a good fit as well.
Because you see him fighting through blocks to get to the running back, to get to the screener. He recognizes things well, triggers well, as I said, and just there's this willingness there and this kind of a need to get to the ball that I like. A lot of corners are going the other way. He's like sort of like heading to the fire type of thing that you like to see. And size doesn't seem to hold him back at this point. And he's not a small guy. Like I said, he's 5'11", which is almost a tall corner in some places, but took official visits to Nebraska, Ohio State, and Oregon this spring. Also had offers from Georgia, Auburn, Florida, LSU, Notre Dame, Oklahoma, USC, Texas. So a national target. Now gives Ohio State 2 corners committed in the class. As you said, Tom, Dijon Johnson, the first one. I'm wondering how many corners there are going to be in this class, because on Monday, Ohio State got a crystal ball from Steve Wiltfong for Calvin Simpson-Hunt, who is a corner committed to Texas Tech at the moment, the number 22 corner in the nation. We know Jermaine Matthews is set to commit at some point soon from Winton Woods. I'm wondering if we're looking at a situation where Ohio State takes 4 corners to help make up for the 2 corners they lost from Ryan Watts and Legend Cavazos, and not having any corners a couple of years ago where you've got to get the numbers right. And 4 is a lot, but it's also not a very deep room right now. There's 6 scholarship corners in the Ohio State's class, maybe 7 now, but certainly not a lot. And Cameron Brown is gone after this year, and Denzel Burke is gone after next year. So maybe we see 4.
Yeah, you're starting to see the math on that stuff change a little bit, because you've got, normally you would think, okay, maybe you take 3 corners in a class, and maybe you take 2-3 safeties. Well, now they're playing 3 safety positions. You're playing 5 defensive backs at a time and not 4. So that has changed the math a little bit. And then the portal has changed the math a little bit, because if you were going through and just sort of plotting out who's going to be on the roster this year, you would have had Ryan Watts and Legend Cavazos, and okay, there's 2 more corners there. Well, now those guys are both in the portal. Cavazos is at Texas. Watts is at Texas. Cavazos is at
North Carolina.
North Carolina, that's right. Turns out a lot of guys have transferred. Who knew? Kind of hard to keep track. Anyway, they're not in Columbus. That's the important part of this conversation. So, and you have seen this team get in real dire straits at various positions, including corner at times, where if you don't have enough healthy guys, that's a big problem, because that's not a place you can just kind of like plug someone else in. So you probably, if you're taking 4 this year, and they might take 4 safeties too this year. I mean, you could potentially end up with 8 defensive backs in this class if they take everyone. And at this point, it feels a little cynical to be talking about it like this with people who are just now committing. But, what are the odds that all 4 of those corners are still on the roster entering their junior season? Probably not great. So in order to have 2 to 3 guys, you might have to take 4. And then, if someone gets homesick or someone just isn't quite up to the level you want them to be, or someone gets hurt, these are all things that happen in modern college football. So if you want to have 2 to 3, you probably need to take 4 right now, with the understanding that someone is going to transfer out, and someone might transfer out from one of the guys who's already on the roster. That's a potential, possibility. Someone might transfer out from the class that's coming in at some point. That's a potential possibility. So the math on this stuff is just, it's a lot different because, 4 corners and 4 safeties in one class, that would have been, insane a little while ago. Now it's like, well, that's just maybe how you're kind of doing business at certain positions if you're trying to catch up a little bit.
Yeah. And I also think you can go back to the 2020 national championship against Alabama when Ohio State had to play 4 linebackers because they didn't have enough defensive backs that could play. And that I'm sure has stuck with Ryan Day. And it's one of those things where like, I am never going to let that happen again. And maybe even to the point where you have too many defensive backs and not enough linebackers like we may have seen against Michigan last year. But, and, even with, Cade Stover having to play linebacker, Rowan McCullough having to play linebacker in the spring game, but not having enough defensive backs in today's college football, you can't have it. And it's a little bit like, you have 16 offensive linemen on scholarship, not because you think all 16 can play, but because you know that they're not all going to play and not everybody's going to pan out. Even the guys who stick around may never play and they just may occupy a spot on the roster. So if you're handing out 8, you love all 8 of those guys to develop into starters. You know that they're not. And in fact, you know that they're not all going to develop into contributors. So in an age where you need at least, I don't know, how many defensive backs do you need every year to pan out? Is it 5? If so, do you bring in 8?
Yeah, you really kind of need you need at least a couple corners every season because, odds are, even if you have 2 corners who pan out every single year, by the time you get to 6, but to the end of the 3rd year, if they've all panned out, someone's leaving early. So then you're down from, 8 to 7, and, someone transfers because they're 7th on the depth chart, and then you're down to 6. And, and then a year from now, guess what? Someone else is leaving. You've got your 4th guy, your guy who's leaving. Then you've got your other guy who's leaving early for the NFL. And you can go from pretty well-stocked room to, pretty quickly to go from lots of guys to, we're in a spot where now you're an injury or 2 away from a big problem. And to your point, you have seen this in the recent past with Ohio State. And if you are going to, not oversign in the classic oversign way, but, bring in an extra body at one of these spots, you're going to do it at a position like defensive back because there are certain places where defensive back it's not quite offensive line in terms of you don't expect someone to walk on campus and play day one. You have seen exceptions. You've seen Denzel Burke last year do it, for example, but generally corners typically follow the J.K. Johnson, Jordan Hancock kind of role where even if you're coming in as a top 50 kind of player nationally, you don't expect that guy to contribute year one. It takes a little bit of time to get up to speed, get your technique going, all that kind of stuff. So it's going to take a little while to figure out what you have with these guys. So now J.K. Johnson and Jordan Hancock are now ready to step up and be, that next line after the starters this year. But then who's the guys behind them? You've got a couple of guys coming in this year as true freshmen, but you're not going to necessarily be able to rely on them right now. So, immediately you're potentially a year from now, if you've lost Cam Brown and you've only got those 3 guys, the J.K. Johnson, Jordan Hancock, Denzel Burke guys, okay, you feel good about those 3. We'll see how the 2 true freshmen this year do. But then the 3 guys that we were just talking about, well, they could all go to the NFL in the 2024 draft. So you're constantly churning through guys because it's just the 3 years goes pretty fast at this point. And, it's a position where it takes a little while to get guys up to speed. So you kind of just have to keep feeding guys into the pipeline so that you have people ready and developed when you need them in a year or 2.
And if a corner struggles, you could try him out at safety. So there's a fallback there because you've even lost Andre Turntine from last year's class, and you're still waiting to see what Jalen Johnson can do from last year's class, who was brought in kind of to be a bullet. Again, that position no longer exists. Same can be said for Court Williams, brought in to be that bullet. that position no longer exists. So they have to be able to play the positions that are available to them. And it's not all that easy. But there you have it, Tom. Another commit for Ohio State's defense. They need more defensive guys. I've got a feeling they're going to be getting some more throughout these next couple of weeks and months.
Jermaine Matthews set to commit on July 1st. Darren Reed, defensive end, set to commit on July 4th. So we may have more emergency podcasts coming in the next little bit. Again, there is no off season.
No, and we wouldn't want it any other way. So that will do it then for the show. Thank you all for tuning in. Enjoy your newest Ohio State future Buckeye. I want to thank you all for tuning in. Reminder to catch Tom on the Morning Scoop. Catch Kevin Noon on the Big Me Kickoff, Alex Gleitman around the Oval, Bill Green, and Mark Givler, Gives in the Bank podcast. I'm sure everybody's going to be talking about this as well. So thanks for tuning in. We'll talk to you guys later.